Unexplained Australia podcast, brought to you by Hunter Valley Ghost Tours and Lakes Paranormal.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the program. My name is Murray Byfield. With me in the studio tonight is Nathan Johnson from Lakes Paranormal. Welcome to our very first podcast, Unexplained Australia podcast. This one's been on the back burner for me for quite a number of years, and I'm finally actually getting around to doing it, which is really good. So we're going to get straight into it tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Been an interesting week for me in the world of the strange and unexplained. I got contacted by Alison Beveridge from Northern Territory News. Excuse me a moment, just shifting. Regarding the image of the Virgin Mary, which appears in a rock face in the Kakadu National Park in Northern Territory. This photograph was actually snapped by her. I believe it was her brother, and she contacted me on Friday afternoon and wanted just to give me a quick quote on what I think it is. Personally, I'm actually going to leave I've already voiced my opinion on 2 radio stations this week, so I'm going to just throw to Nathan here and actually get his opinion on what do you reckon about this?
My opinion, okay, matrixing is my belief. I think that it is probably just worn in such a way, erosion, water, whatever, that it just looks like something in our minds just automatically make of it what we will. So I can't remember the peri, whatever it is. That
pareidolia.
That's the one. Yeah. And that's my belief. But I can easily see why people would be mistaken by it. It's interested in it. It is something to look at. But my belief, no, nothing more than that. Nothing paranormal.
Yeah. So pareidolia, for those who don't really know, there are probably a lot of you out there that do not understand what pareidolia is or what matrixing is. Basically, it's the ability, not the ability, the tendency rather of the human mind to make familiar familiar things out of patterns and random shapes and things like that. So therefore, things like clouds and Jesus in the toasted sandwich and that kind of thing. So the human mind has a tendency to want to make a pattern out of something or make something familiar to us. Because when you really think about it, even the image we're looking at there on the screen is only really just little dots that make up a picture. So yeah, I didn't really know what they were trying to get me to say, because they were kind of like, I don't know if they were sort of pushing for maybe a bit of a tourist angle here or something. I don't really know, but they were sort of like really, really keen, particularly in the NT. They really wanted for me to sort of say that it was something. Well, that I felt this. I don't know if this is actually what they wanted, but to me, it felt like they wanted it to be sort of a bit supernatural or unexplained. I really don't know, but and actually, the guy from the Northern Territory radio station actually said, "Oh, are you a skeptic?" And I said, "Well, no, I'm not really a skeptic. I just like to look at things from a logical point of view, and the simplest explanation is usually the right one, the correct one." So yeah, but if you hop on to www.unexplainedaustralia.com, and that's on the front page there if you want to have a look at it. If you want to send us an email or give us a comment under the video, because this will be posted on YouTube when we're finished, and leave us a comment there what you think it is, and yeah.
Who found it?
I believe it was the reporter Alison Beveridge. It was her brother was come up from Sydney for a holiday up in the national park, and he was walking along the trail there, and he saw that, and he just took a picture of it. So yeah. I mean, some people say it looks like an alien. Some people say it looks like personally, I can't see the Virgin Mary in there myself. But
no, I'm going for Alice Cooper.
Going for Alice Cooper?
Yeah.
Alrighty. So yeah, that's a bit of an interesting one for this week. Mm-hmm. What we're going to do for you mainly tonight, ladies and gentlemen, being the very first podcast that we've done, we're actually going to throw to a lecture which I attended last week at the Old George and Dragon restaurant in East Maitland, and these nights are called the Afterlife Discussions, and they're organised by Renata Daniel from Newcastle Ghost Tours, and we've had a sequence of these talks. The first talk was on ghosts and hauntings and things like that, but this one was actually this one was done by, excuse me, sorry, it was done by Dr Marguerite Johnson, who's a lecturer at this University of Newcastle. And her expertise is, she's a classicist, so she studies ancient Greece and Rome, and she actually teaches Latin as well. And she was an absolutely fascinating speaker. And her particular interest is in actually is in ghosts, but is also in magic and ghosts, and how in the ancient world that that the ancients used ghosts through their magic, which she will actually get to when we throw to the recording. Very, very fascinating lecture. She's actually got a lecture next Thursday, the 11th of July, at the Museum Theaterette. I'm not exactly sure what that is, now that's at the uni or not. And the cost is $10 per person, which includes a glass of wine. To make bookings, you can ring on 0249 741400.
That'd be one to get to, ladies and gentlemen.
Really, really fantastic speaker. She had us all just in a trance the night that she gave the speech or the talk to us, and very down to earth. And you can ask her any sort of question you like. So she also does an actual lecture of magic and witchcraft. A class at the university as well, which she said she just finished up the other week. So yeah. So, okay, well, we're going to throw over to the talk right now, and we'll catch you on the other side.
The Afterlife Discussions, brought to you by Newcastle Ghost Tours and the Old George and Dragon Restaurant, East Maitland. For more information, go to newcastleghosttours.com.au.
So, ghosts in ancient Greece and Rome. Before I sort of tell you about the ghosts in antiquity, I should say that the ancients, the period I'm going to talk about, goes from about 700, 800 BC, and I'm going to go right through to the 1st century AD. So I'm covering, 1,000 odd years or so. I'm going to start with Greece, and then I'm going to move on to Rome. I should tell you that the Greeks and Romans were people very different to us. The Greeks and the Romans believed that the world was animated, which is a beautiful thought, and I still love that about antiquity. The world was animated. There were spirits in the streams. There were dryads in the trees. There were daemons, which is where we get our word demons from. And daemons talked to you. There were gods and goddesses. The world was just, humming with this animation. And they were polytheistic people, both the Greeks and the Romans. They had multiple gods and goddesses. The idea of monotheism, with belief in one god, would have been completely alien to them. So this sort of belief system was connected very much with their belief in ghosts, because the ghosts were also part of the forces that animated the world. They could be contacted, and they actively contacted people. And the Greeks and the Romans are vitally important if you're interested in a history of ghosts, because it shows you from the earliest times, the earliest records we have in terms of a Western tradition, that the Greeks and the Romans were thinking, writing and experiencing ghosts. And one of the earliest examples, and they even categorized them. They were mad people for categorizing things. The Greeks, for example, had a series of terms. There were the aroro, those dead before their time. There was those dead by violence, by ophenatoi. There were those dead before marriage, agamoi, and those dead without burial, ataphoi. So they had an active vocabulary to categorize their ghosts. And these were people, they believed essentially that ghosts were people who had died before their time, in any of these categories. Before fate, they were absolute strong believers in fate. And so they believed that the minute you were born, your fate was cast. The fates spun your destiny on their spinning wheel and cut the thread. So you were fated to be born at a certain time and die at a certain time. Now, if something happened that interrupts your fate, you're going to be a restless spirit. So the first one, those dead before their time, something happens that interferes with their fate. Those dead by violence will never be restful. Those dead before marriage, you think, who cares, you know, whether you die before marriage or you didn't die before marriage. Huge with the ancient Greeks, because they believed, particularly with women fall into this category, these are often female ghosts. These are women who you were expected to be married by around about 14, 15, and to have children and to produce a male, an heir. Now, if that happened, didn't happen, you were the failure of the family, that you never lived up to the expectations of your parents. And so you see in ancient Greece these beautiful grave monuments that say, you know, such and such died at the age of 7. She never grew up to be a mother and a wife. That was a woman's lot. So these are particularly problematic female ghosts. Those dead without burial are also the restless dead. The Greeks had elaborate funeral rituals that had to be adhered to, and if you missed a step in that funeral ritual, then you are condemning that person to a life of restlessness, and they will haunt the place where they were improperly buried until someone comes and sets them free. The ghosts were quite often troublesome, and the Greeks were frightened of ghosts by and large, as were the Romans. And these ghosts could manifest themselves into troublesome beings. Now, the very first reference we have to ghosts in Western civilization, you know, the first thing that was written about ghosts was written by one of the ancient Greeks, and we have a record, and this is by the composer called Homer. And you may have seen, anyone has seen the film Troy, starring Brad Pitt as Achilles, is based on this. And this was a poem that was recorded by a person called Homer in the 8th century BC. So we're looking around about 750 BC. It's a very, very early piece of Greek writing. And it tells the story of the Trojan War. And it tells the story of Achilles, played by the gorgeous Brad Pitt, who was a Greek soldier who went to Troy, and they're trapped there for 10 years. And Achilles had a best friend called Patroclus, and if anyone can remember the film, they make Patroclus his cousin. He was his friend. And Achilles was passionately in love with Patroclus. And Patroclus is ripped apart, dismembered, and left on the battlefield. And Achilles goes into this hysteria. And the first ghost that ever speaks in the Western literary tradition is the ghost of Patroclus. And Achilles has been in and out of sleep, dreaming. And the next minute, because Achilles it's all about Achilles, he's hysterical with grief, and poor old Patroclus is laying there unburied while everyone worries about Achilles. And Patroclus comes to him. And this is an extract from the Greek. I hope you can see it, but I'll read it to you anyway. Very first ghost reference. The ghost of unfortunate Patroclus came upon him, resembling, very important, how did the Greeks at this time in the 8th century BC, what they think ghosts were like? Resembling the living man in all things. So Patroclus looks as he looks, in stature, in his beautiful eyes, and in his voice. And it was dressed, notice Homer uses the word it, ceases being a human being who has a gender. It was dressed in clothes resembling his. The clothes looked like the clothes Patroclus wore. The soul stood over his head, so talking to Achilles, and spoke to him. You sleep, but you have forgotten me, Achilles. You cared for me when I was alive, but now I'm dead. Bury me as quickly as possible so that I may pass through the gates of Hades. Release me. Do something with my body, because I cannot go to Hades. I can't cross over until you do this. The souls ward me back a distance, the ghosts of the dead, and they do not yet allow me to mingle with them beyond the river. But in this condition I wander about the broad gated house of Hades. Give me your hand, I beg you through my tears, for I shall not come again from Hades when you have given me the fire that is my due. So Patroclus disemboweled this body of this gorgeous man dead on the battlefield, and the soul comes back and is saying to Achilles, I've been down there, I get to the river, but they won't let me cross. I want to go there, let me go. But until you pull yourself together and burn my body and release my soul with the proper rituals, those shades, those gulfs are going to keep pushing my soul back onto the earth. Mind-blowing. This is 8th century BC. And this scene from the Iliad has been painted over and over and over again by artists. Here you see Achilles sleeping and the ghost of Patroclus dressed in his armour coming back to him. And what's interesting is Homer tells us that Patroclus comes to Achilles in his dreams, and that's what the Greeks often believed. Very, very common belief in the ancient Greek world, that you don't just sort of cruise along and run into a ghost, but if a ghost wants to give you a message, they'll come to you in your sleep, and that's the first encounter we ever have. And of course then Achilles performs the proper funeral rituals and Patroclus is released to the land of the dead. The Greeks had no idea of a heaven and hell. Everyone went to the land of the dead, to Hades, and there was a river, the river Styx. You cross the river Styx and then you're finally released, and the ferryman Charon will row you across the river, and once you step over, you're gone, and you've got very little memory of what your life has been. And there were all sorts of places in the land of the dead, places for naughty people, places for good people, places for people who were a bit naughty and a bit good. They sort of had all these little sections, and depending on how you lived your life, you'd cross the river and then you would go to your designated area. Now, there's I'm going to give you one more example. And the example is just recorded about 50 years later, so about 700 BC. And it's a story also attributed to the poet Homer. And this is the story of the Odyssey. Can't be written by the same person, but the Greeks thought it was. And the Odyssey is the story of the men who return from Troy. Now, it is principally the story of Odysseus. He was a Greek soldier at Troy. He invented the Trojan horse, and he fought in the 10-year war at Troy, and it took the fool 10 years to get home while his wife waited for him to come home, because he kept getting washed ashore onto islands with nymphs and witches and temptresses, and had to stay there with them. When his wife stays faithful to him for 20 years. 20 years while the fool is at Troy, 20 years while he's trying to get home. He has a whale of a time on the way home. And one of the people he encounters on the way home is a witch called Circe. And Circe is stunningly beautiful. She's a goddess who lives on the earth. Just a minor goddess. She's not one of the biggies. And she forces Odysseus to stay with her as her companion for a year. And eventually he says, look, Penelope is waiting at home. I need to go home. And she says, you'll go home when you know fully what awaits you. Now, Circe knew everything. She was a witch, but she was also a necromancer. And necromancers reanimate the dead to see into the future. And she says to Odysseus, terrible things await you on the sea when you leave my island, and worse things await you at home when you get back. You have to know these things. She said, go and talk to the ghosts, and they will tell you. And so what Circe makes him do is call up the ghosts from the dead to tell him his future. And ghosts were the practice of necromancy, reanimation of the dead for prophetic vision, was widespread in antiquity. And again, you look at a piece of literature from the Greeks recorded around about 700 BC, and they are recording the Greek contacts with the dead for the purposes of divination. So I'm going to give you a tiny little bit of an extract from the Odyssey. Circe, Zeus-born, son of Laertes, Odysseus, of many devices, please do not remain in my house if you do not want to. But first you must accomplish another journey and come to the house of Hades and dread Persephone, to consult the ghost of Theban Tiresias, the prophet who is blind, although his mind is sound. For to him alone did Persephone grant retention of his wits even after death, but the other dead just flit about as shadows. So you go, you animate the soul, the spirit of Tiresias. He will tell you what awaits you on your journey. She could have told him, but she's just a cow. So she makes him go, you go and do this. She knows everything, but she plays with him and she plays with people. And so we get the first recording of the practice of reanimation of souls. She tells Odysseus, before you ever call up a ghost, you must practice these rituals. And he performs elaborate rituals. Dig a pit, a cubit wide, this way and that. Around it pour a full libation to all the dead, first with honey milk, then with sweet wine, and third with water. Sprinkle white barley on top, pray at length to the powerless folk of the dead, and promise them that when you have come to Ithaca, that's his home, you will sacrifice to them in your palace your best barren heifer, and that you will heap up a pyre with offerings, and that you will sacrifice to Tiresias separately an all-black sheep, the outstanding one among your flock. You perform all these rituals before these ghosts are going to come up out of the land of the dead, and when you get home, Odysseus, you've got to do it again. So the idea is that these ghosts have to be handled with kid gloves, and they won't come up unless you pour the libations, perform the sacrifices, and then you have this amazing description of the souls coming up from the earth to deliver Odysseus his prophecy. The ritual she instructs him to perform is elaborate. When you have prayed to the glorious tribes of the dead, sacrifice a male sheep and a black ewe, twisting their heads down to Erebus, that's the land of the shadows, while turning back yourself in longing for the streams of the river. At that point, many ghosts of the dead will come up. Now, this gives us a major insight into what the Greeks thought about ghosts. Notice not only the rituals, but turn your head. So when they come up, don't look at them, don't contact them, don't look at them at all. So he is instructed for some reason, and scholars, like me, spend the rest of their lives thinking, oh, why did she say that? And one of the theories is that the Greeks were quite frightened of ghosts, and that there could have been a fear that if you made eye contact with them or you got too close, in some way they'd lock you in. And contact with them in a direct way would perhaps cause you illness, make you a ghost yourself, cause you to actually die and become a ghost. But they've got to be handled carefully. And so he can't look at them, and he must treat them with kid gloves. So he performs the rites, and the ghosts are described. So this is a description of the ghosts. The ghosts of the dead assembled from Erebus. Notice the types of people who come up. What are the first ones? Brides. So women who died before what? They had a baby. So these died before their time. Bachelors, men who'd never lived to fulfill the role that was expected of them. Old men who had suffered much. Tender maidens, so virgins, with their fresh grief. Warriors wounded by bronze-tipped spears, so the violence of death. Men killed in battle with their bloodied armour. From all sides they crowded en masse round the pit with a terrible cry. Fear gripped me, Odysseus is talking now, and turned me pale. So very much an experience similar to my 10-year-old daughter's. Fear gripped her, and boy, did she turn pale. And so it's a strange thing that this is a fantasy tale about, a man who went to the Trojan War and invented the Trojan horse. It's make-up literature. but yet there are kernels of truth in this. This is what these people believed in at this time. So I put this in because it tells us that they were around for so long, and the belief in them was around for so long. So that was what we call the Archaic Age. The earliest writings we have, the earliest imprint in literature that the Greeks left us.
Okay, so we're just going to pull up there because it's quite a long lecture, and it keeps going for another good 15, 20 minutes. So I just wanted to quickly discuss a couple of the points that she brings up there. A couple that I find really interesting, and it's one of the things I guess that people still believe in these days in terms of why ghosts are created and things like that. In particular, the burial rites and things like that she was talking about. Unless a body is buried correctly, the particular rites are performed and everything, and they're buried in the ground and stuff like that. That the person turns into a ghost. A lot of people have that opinion now. I wouldn't, just in my own research, I wouldn't necessarily agree with that these days. But I guess that's an old belief.
Yeah, I would say so. But I mean, it's a matter of opinion, really. I mean, depending on religion or your own belief of how people die and how they're buried and all that sort of stuff. What are ghosts? It comes down to that, really. So heavy.
Yeah. The other thing I found really good too was when she was talking about trying to get over to the other side or trying to cross the river Styx. I can't remember the fellow's name, so he couldn't pass over to the other side, and I found the river Styx is that what interests a good point I'm trying to make here, I guess. When people have near-death experiences, what they quite often talk about in their experiences, there's a border, or there's a line that they can't cross, or they don't dare to cross until they're quite ready to go over. And I guess there can be different what we consider physical things from the physical world, like a river or a stream or a fence or I don't know, a gate or something like that. A lot of people who have near-death experiences, they describe a similar thing where there's a line that they can't cross until they're quite ready to go. So I find that correlates and parallels, modern accounts of near-death experiences as well. So
yeah, imagery, interesting.
It's all in interpretation. Some people have near-death experiences. A Christian may have a near-death experience where they see Christ and they're in heaven, where a pagan may see. Or Native American might see the happy hunting ground or whatever. You know what I mean? I think our interpretation, once we get back from the other from near-death experience, we interpret it in a cultural sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's no other way really. You're taught and you grow up believing a certain thing, and I suppose that would carry on after you die and come back again. Why not?
And we're just going to pull up there for now. If anybody would like to leave any comments, please leave some below or send us an email, murraybyfield@unexplainedaustralia.com. We're also looking for guests to appear on the podcast as well, so if you're interested, please email us again on that same email address, murraybyfield@unexplainedaustralia.com. I'm going to post up the next half of this lecture within the next couple of days, so I hope you tune in. Thank you.
Thank you.
Unexplained Australia podcast brought to you by Hunter Valley Ghost Tours and Lakes Paranormal. Don't forget to visit us at www.unexplainedaustralia.com.